On March 8, 1944, beneath the heavy tropical air of Bougainville and atop the jagged coral spine known as Hill 700, the American defensive perimeter stood on the brink of collapse as the Japanese 23rd Infantry hurled itself forward in relentless night assaults that battered the exhausted soldiers of Major General John Hester's 37th Infantry Division, cracking the line bunker by bunker and position by position until every instinct drilled into professional soldiers screamed that retreat was the only rational response, for doctrine, precedent, and survival itself demanded withdrawal to safer ground, consolidation of forces, and preservation of combat power. Yet as dawn spread weak light across the Solomon Islands, Hester made a decision so counterintuitive that it would have been condemned in any theoretical war college discussion, choosing not retreat but deliberate endurance, ordering his battered troops to hold their ground, dig deeper, and allow the enemy to come closer, a decision that stunned his staff officers as Japanese forces appeared to tighten the noose around American positions, convincing enemy commanders that fortune had finally smiled upon them, that the Americans were surrounded, trapped, and on the verge of annihilation, prompting General Harukichi Hyakutake to commit nearly 1,700 men into what he believed was the perfect killing ground, unaware that he was advancing straight into a meticulously constructed defensive trap designed to consume attacking strength through time, terrain, and firepower. The night of March 9th opened with Japanese artillery at 2,300 hours, shells falling on Hill 700 in a steady, methodical pattern, each explosion shaking coral, mud, and nerves alike as Hester studied flickering radio messages in his command bunker while Colonel George Reed struggled to coordinate his 2nd Battalion under conditions deliberately chosen by the enemy. A moonless night that neutralized American air power and reduced visibility to mere yards, forcing soldiers to rely on sound, instinct, and discipline as they crouched in foxholes and bunkers listening to the jungle come alive with the metallic clatter of equipment, whispered Japanese commands, and vegetation parting beneath hundreds of advancing men. Captain Edward Johnson moved tirelessly along the forward positions, counting ammunition, steadying frightened soldiers, and confronting the brutal arithmetic of the fight. 1,700 attackers pressing against a thinly stretched defense holding terrain meant for far more men, knowing that Hill 700's natural strength meant nothing if there were not enough rifles to exploit it. And when the Japanese artillery abruptly fell silent at 0200 hours, the sudden quiet carried a deeper terror than the barrage itself, a pause Sergeant William Harris instantly recognized as the prelude to assault, years of Pacific combat having taught him that silence meant death was close. At 0215 Japanese soldiers emerged like shadows, faces smeared with charcoal, uniforms soaked in mud, advancing in small, disciplined groups until grenade range was reached, Arisaka rifles cracking through the darkness as muzzle flashes danced across the hillside, while Reed called down artillery that illuminated the battlefield in stark flashes, revealing wave after wave of attackers replacing fallen comrades with chilling determination. Johnson fought desperately to hold Bunker 17 as Japanese troops pressed within 50 yards, close enough to hear shouted orders and the metallic snap of bolts, while American rifles barked in controlled bursts, Garand clips pinging empty amid the cries of wounded men from both armies, the air thick with smoke, fear, and the metallic scent of blood. As the night stretched on, Japanese doctrine revealed itself through relentless probing attacks, testing American resolve at multiple points before concentrating force wherever a weakness appeared, a method that had succeeded across the Pacific but required unbroken momentum. And when Japanese soldiers breached near Bunker 12, Harris led a savage counterattack through darkness and confusion, grenades and automatic fire tearing through enemy positions at point-blank range, watching 2 of his men die beneath bayonets before cutting the attackers down, the fight so intimate that faces were visible in muzzle flashes. By 0400 the battle settled into a brutal rhythm of assault and repulse, Japanese charges answered by rifle and artillery fire, Americans yielding ground deliberately while buying precious time, evacuating wounded as Japanese bodies accumulated in coral gullies and jungle clearings. And Reed understood with grim clarity that every hour held delayed the enemy's drive toward the Piva airfields, while draining the strength of an elite force operating at the end of a tenuous supply chain. Near 0500 Japanese infiltrators appeared behind American lines, threatening command posts and supply routes, forcing Johnson to fight in multiple directions as his company dwindled from 137 men to fewer than 90 by dawn on March 10, when both sides paused amid the wreckage, revealing Japanese losses exceeding 300 killed and wounded, while American casualties, though lighter, still represented nearly 15% of the defenders, and as Hester reviewed intelligence reports indicating this was merely the opening blow of a larger offensive, he understood Hyakutake was gambling everything, committing the full weight of the 17th Army to a decisive push to recapture the airfields that governed the Solomons. On March 11, fresh Japanese battalions attacked again. Enemy intelligence convinced American morale was collapsing, unaware that Hester was deliberately contracting his perimeter to draw attackers into overlapping fields of fire, and as Reed observed hundreds of Japanese soldiers massing below Hill 700, he unleashed devastating artillery barrages that tore through jungle staging areas, while Johnson repositioned his remaining men into reverse-slope defenses prepared weeks earlier, positions that concealed defenders until attackers fully committed, maximizing lethality. Harris occupied Bunker 19, calculating ammunition and time with cold precision, knowing his squad could sustain only minutes of sustained combat. And when the Japanese attack came at 13:30 under accurate mortar fire followed by a coordinated infantry advance more professional than anything yet encountered, Johnson waited until the enemy was fully exposed before opening fire, shattering formations with concentrated rifle fire as Harris fought at point-blank range to contain penetrations, coordinating through trenches amid smoke and chaos. When Japanese troops briefly captured Bunker 17 and raised their battle flag, the momentary triumph collapsed under pre-planned counterattacks and artillery fired at minimum safe range, shells passing barely yards overhead, demanding absolute trust between infantry and gunners. By late afternoon, Japanese momentum failed beneath mounting casualties, Reed's battalion reduced by nearly half while Harris counted dozens of enemy dead within sight of his position, and Hester recognized his strategy was succeeding as Japanese forces destroyed themselves against prepared defenses. On March 13, Hyakutake committed his final reserves in desperation, unleashing the heaviest bombardment yet before dawn, severing communications and filling the air with coral fragments as Harris watched two enemy companies form below his position, and when the infantry assault followed, advancing with textbook precision, American fire erupted in overlapping crossfires that annihilated the attackers. Browning automatic rifles scything through ranks while Reed expended artillery ammunition at maximum rate, gambling that minutes would decide the battle. When Japanese troops penetrated Bunker Complex Beta and raised their flag once more, they were annihilated in savage close quarters fighting inside the perimeter, Harris ambushing enemy soldiers in deadly seconds-long engagements until, by 0800, Japanese losses exceeded their capacity to continue, and by 0900 surviving troops fled into the jungle, abandoning wounded and equipment as American forces seized the initiative. Silence settled over Hill 700 as Hester surveyed a battlefield transformed into proof of disciplined defense, Reed's casualty reports revealing the scale of victory: 263 American casualties against more than 1,900 Japanese killed and wounded. While Johnson tended shattered survivors, Harris collected abandoned weapons, and intelligence confirmed Hyakutake had destroyed nearly his entire army in a catastrophic miscalculation that secured American control of Bougainville and the northern Solomons. In the weeks that followed, abandoned fortifications, spiked guns, scattered letters, and overwhelmed aid stations testified to the annihilation of a professional force, while American planners absorbed the lessons of Hill 700, reverse slope defense, interlocking fire, tactical patience, and concentrated artillery, transforming them into doctrine that would guide future Pacific operations. And as Harris received promotion, Johnson trained new officers, and Hester finalized an after-action report. Destined for military academies, The battle for Hill 700 stood as definitive proof that the war in the Pacific had turned not through reckless assault but through methodical, disciplined, and devastatingly effective defensive warfare, where preparation, restraint, and firepower combined to destroy an enemy that mistook endurance for weakness and patience for collapse.